So, let's talk about this. What video game should Capcom remake next? What's up, YouTube? It's JackalGoldKick. So I've seen people talk about this before. I want to talk about it myself because I'm a fan of Dead Rising. The video game I think Capcom should remake next is Dead Rising 1. The reason I choose Dead Rising 1 is because, it's been interesting to see Resident Evil get these remakes, 2, 3, and 4, see what they do with them, good or bad. It's interesting. And, I do love Dead Rising 1, but I would be very curious on like a remake of Dead Rising 1 to see them do like a modern take and how that would turn out and how they would go about doing it. Like what would a Dead Rising 1 remake look like? And I think that should be the next game Capcom should remake. I think it would be interesting to see it because, on one hand, I think a reason a Dead Rising 1 remake would be a no-brainer is because, well, fortunately, Dead Rising's in a shitty state. I mean, the first 2 games were good, but 3 and 4 sucked. I had a video before this about the DR5 crap. So Dead Rising, it's not in a good state. It's not. It's left on a sour taste. A lot of people weren't happy with 3, especially 4. I wasn't either. I love Dead Rising, but it went downhill with 3 and 4. And I think if Capcom wants to bring Dead Rising back and win fans over, I think their best bet is going back to basics, going to the beginning, remaking Dead Rising 1. Now, I'm kind of conflicted about that because the thing is with remakes, right? It's very, to me, the original Dead Rising 1 is a really good game. And, when you're remaking such a legendary game, it's hard, because the thing I think about is what are they going to change? Will they cut this? Stuff like that. So, I would love to see a Dead Rising 1 remake. Now, in terms of an engine, I don't know what game engine they should use. That's what I'm conflicted about. I know they'd probably use the RE engine since they used it for DMC5 and they use it for the Resident Evil games they've released recently, but the reason I don't know if they could use the RE engine for a Dead Rising 1 remake is because the RE engine, I don't know if it can handle Dead Rising. Because the thing about Dead Rising is not only do they have to have all these zombies on the screen and all the shit going on, but they also have to have visuals and stuff. And if you play Resident Evil 3 Remake, it looks good, but the zombies drop frame rates in the background because of how the engine is. That didn't happen in Dead Rising 1. RE4 Remake, when I played it, I didn't notice that same issue. So maybe the RE engine could handle a Dead Rising remake. So in terms of the engine, I don't really know what they would go with. They'd probably choose the RE engine. I mean, if I could choose, I would say go with the MT Framework engine, which is what the original Dead Rising was made on, because that's a powerful engine. They used it for Dead Rising 1, they used it for DMC4, they used it for Resident Evil 5. Really good engine. I'm not used to filming outside, so never mind that. Who gives a shit? Organic, natural how I am. Anyways, the MT Framework engine's really good. It made games look great. Games looked great in RE5, Dead Rising 1. It was a powerful engine. I mean, the whole reason MT Framework engine exists is because of Dead Rising 1. So, at most, if they remake Dead Rising 1, I think they're going to use the RE engine. Which, if it can handle it, it's not going to be a bad thing. But I don't know if it'll be able to handle Dead Rising 1. Because, there's a huge difference between Resident Evil and Dead Rising. Resident Evil, they got a lot of enemies, but Dead Rising is a whole different beast. You got all these zombies on screen constantly. And if they want to, because there's a lot they could do with the Dead Rising 1 remake, which I'll get to soon. But in terms of the engine, I would say MT Framework engine, the same engine as Dead Rising 1. Upgrade that engine. I think that's what I would want, because I like the style and the weapons and what they do with Dead Rising 1 and the MT Framework engine. But the RE engine more likely is going to be used. I just hope if they use it, they don't. I don't know. I'm conflicted about the RE engine because Dead Rising 1, there's a lot going on, so that's debatable. In terms of directors, who I think should make it, the people who made RE2 Remake did a good job, so involve them. I would say get KG involved. I know Shinji never came back for 2 or 4 Remake, and he doesn't really make Resident Evil games anymore, but KG Inafune was a huge part of Dead Rising being really good and having a lot of success. And, you know, if they're going to remake Dead Rising 1, I think they should get Keiji Inafune, get him involved, have him, you know, be a part of the project. I think that would be very essential. And anybody else that was a part of the Dead Rising 1 team, and the people that, the good developers that, you know, did a pretty good job with 2, maybe have them involved. That'd be interesting. And then maybe like RE2 remake teams. That's kind of what you could do with the developers. I mean, I'm sure. I mean, I don't know. It could just be a situation where they have new developers, or they have the RE2 remake team, and maybe they'll blow it out of the park if this ever happened. But I would choose the RE2 remake team. I would have Keiji Inafune involved. I would choose to have some of the Dead Rising 1 developers. You know, have the right people. Especially Keiji Inafune. I think he should direct the Dead Rising 1 remake. I think it would, you know, it would be worrying if we didn't have him involved. Now, in terms of a Dead Rising 1 remake, what could they do with it? It would be interesting, right? So if they ever, you know, this is a wish list, right? This isn't announced. There's no news of it, but I do think it's the next video game I think Capcom should remake. I would love to see a modern remake take on Dead Rising 1 to see what they would do with it, how it would play, what it would look like, you know, because we've seen these Resident Evil games, and I'd like to see Capcom, you know, focus on another franchise and give Resident Evil a break, because we've had plenty of Resident Evil games. You know, give Resident Evil a break, you know. But Dead Rising, man, let's remake Dead Rising next. Dead Rising, you could bring it back to its former glory. So, in terms of what they could do with the Dead Rising remake, let's talk about this. So, I know a lot of people don't like the Survivor AI, and I'm pretty sure they would tweak the Survivor AI if they were to remake Dead Rising 1. Me personally, I don't mind the Survivor AI in Dead Rising 1. I know it's stupid, but it's what makes the game challenging. It's rewarding, and it's challenging to escort survivors and bring them back to the safe house. It really is. And I feel like with a remake, if you take the survivors and you make them easy to rescue, or if you tweak their AI, you run into that territory where it might be like Dead Rising 3 or even 2, where the, you know, like I said, I know a lot of people don't like the Survivor AI in 1, but I don't know what they're going to do with that. Maybe they could find a way to make it to where, hey, you can put it on this difficulty if you want the old Survivor AI. Or maybe they could tweak the Survivor AI and still find another way to make it challenging. They need to find a common ground for that, because you know, rescuing survivors is a key part of the original, and I know the AI getting tweaked is something a lot of people would want, because that's one of the biggest complaints a lot of people have with the game. I mean, yeah, the AI gets on my nerves sometimes too, but I honestly like it that way because it's what makes the game challenging. I think the only times the AI is stupid and should be tweaked is when you take them to the safe house and they keep running into each other, or they get stuck on a fucking plants. You know, things like that should be tweaked. But, you know, I don't want the Survivor AI tweaked to the point where survivors rescuing them is easy. I don't want that. I don't want that. So I don't know how they'll handle that. Meet in the middle. Maybe they'll keep it the same. Maybe there'll be a difficulty option. Maybe they'll tweak it and find another way to make it harder. I would say, you know, some other stuff they could do with the Dead Rising 1 remake. Add co-op. I think it would be cool to have co-op in there. And how I would do it is just do what 2 did, Clone a Frank. Because what I liked about Dead Rising 2 is when it did co-op, you just had a clone of Chuck. I liked that because, you know why I like that? Because it doesn't take away from the single player experience. See, the issue I have with Resident Evil 5 and 6, you can't enjoy them by yourself. You have to play it with a friend, or else you got this AI following you. I don't want that in a Dead Rising game. So if they remake Dead Rising 1, they could add co-op. Just have a clone of Frank. Who gives a shit? It would be cool. It'd be interesting. It'd be be interesting to see that co-op in a Dead Rising 1 remake. Just have a clone of Frank. You know, that way you don't gotta waste time making a whole new character and having an AI. Nope, it can just be just like 2. Completely fine with that. They could flesh out a lot of the characters. You know, they could give more screen time and flesh out more with all the psychopaths, all the story characters, all the characters in general. They could add new areas. Some of the stuff I'd like to see in a Dead Rising remake, I would like to see, I'm trying to think. I would love to see Willamette Town be explorable. Willamette Town is really cool, or Willamette itself outside of the mall. A Dead Rising remake where you could like explore the town would be really cool. And you know, I would hope it would be longer. You see, the thing about like the original Dead Rising 1 is when they were making it, they had a lot of ideas. Brock was going to have a bigger role. The game was going to be 7 days or 10 days. You know, there was a lot more going on in Dead Rising 1, but they couldn't do a lot of the stuff they wanted to do because they had a certain release date and Microsoft was rushing them. But they still managed to make a good game. Makes you wonder why that isn't done nowadays when companies are rushed. I don't know. Anyways, so with a remake of Dead Rising 1, the survivor AI, they got to find a common ground so people will, you know, be happy with how the AI is tweaked, but you know, people like me that like the challenge won't be let down where it's like, oh, it's easy now, great, you know. So common ground for that. RE engine if it can handle it, but I vote MT Framework engine. Get KG involved, RE2 remake team. I know they would probably use new voice actors. I love the original cast, I really do. I mean, you know, if I had it my way, I would just use the same voice actors. Just have TJ come back as Frank. Just use the same voice actors. They're good, and it would be interesting to, and plus it would kind of make it different than the Resident Evil remakes, you know? Like, I'm sure, like, I don't know if it'd be similar to the Resident Evil remakes. Like, I don't know where I'm going with this, but, you know, Resident Evil remakes, they decide to just do new voice actors. But, you know, honestly, they should just use the same voice actors for Dead Rising remake. Just, you know, and it'd be interesting because, well, some of them wouldn't be able to come back because I know the voice actor for the boss Larry's dead. So rest in peace to him. They'd probably have to recast him, but I would vote keep the original voice actors, and it'd probably be fun for them because they'd get to come back years later and, like, you know, do voice work for a game again, and it'd be interesting, you know, and it'd be different than the Resident Evil remakes. It'd make it stand out from the remakes, reimaginings, because, okay, this series, yeah, it's remaking like Resident Evil, but it's keeping its voice actors, not new actors. I personally keep the same voice actors, you know, or at least keep the original Frank, please, because TJ Rotolo is so good as Frank. It's like it's like the Bruce Campbell stuff. Bruce Campbell is Ash. Nobody else can be Ash, you know. Nobody else can be Frank, man. Like, I don't know, Michael DeSanta, his voice actor, yeah, he sounds like Frank. And realistically, they probably would go with new voice actors. I mean, I would just hope they would be good, but I vote just keep the original cast. What else could they do with a Dead Rising remake? You know, make it look even better than the original graphically. You know, tweak the gameplay, improve it. Keep the timer, please, because that's essential to Dead Rising. It's all about beating the clock and, you know, keeping track of your watch and the missions and scoops and all that. And I think they should definitely keep the timer. I mean, the timer is essential to Dead Rising. I know there's some people that like Dead Rising, but they hate the timer. But, you know, I don't know, you can't remake Dead Rising and just get rid of the timer. Like, I would be so pissed off about that personally. I mean, it would take too much money to do this, so realistically this wouldn't happen. But probably the only way you could pull this off, like make everyone happy, you'd have to make 2 versions of the Dead Rising 1 remake. A whole version with no timer, and then a whole version with the timer. Then everybody'd be happy, but obviously that wouldn't happen. That would take so much money and time. So I say keep the timer in. I'm sure they tweak it, you know, because a lot of new games are kind of easier than older games in some instances. So with the timer, keep the timer, please. That's what makes Dead Rising unique. I like the timer. At best, if you want people, you know, if people want to fuck around in the mall and kill zombies, they hate the timer, put sandbox mode, and that's another thing we can talk about. Put sandbox mode in Dead Rising 1 Remake. I know there's infinity mode. I would say keep infinity mode. Make it to where you can save, though, because to me it's bullshit how in the original infinity mode you can't save. Because, you know, what if your power goes out, or what if your console freezes and you're trying to get 5 or 7 day survivor? Well, you're done for. So maybe that'd make it easier, but I don't care. They should add just some kind of save system for infinity mode, even if it's limited. You know, they need to have a save system if anyone in the remake. Sandbox mode, I think they should add. That way people can, you know, you can enjoy the game without the timer. You know, sandbox mode would be fun. Co-op. Now this next one, you know, I don't know if people will agree or disagree with me on this. I don't think they should put combo weapons in the Dead Rising remake. And the reason I say that is because one of the things I noticed about Dead Rising is, as cool as the combo weapons are, as soon as they added the combo weapons, it kind of like made the regular weapons weaker, you know? The regular weapons are still good, but they're not. The regular weapons were way more powerful. Machete, baseball bat, everything was just stronger. And the combo weapons are cool, don't get me wrong, but they went way too overboard with them, made the regular weapons weaker. Combo weapons, it kind of, you know, messes with the game's difficulty where it becomes a little bit easier. So I say I would honestly be fine if they didn't put combo weapons in the Dead Rising remake, because, you know, the regular weapons are great in Dead Rising 1, and I wouldn't want that messed with. If they want to put combo weapons in Dead Rising 1 remake, maybe what they could do is make it limited, where you only have a certain amount of, like, I don't know how they would do this. I mean, I don't know how they would do this, but maybe you only have a certain amount of times you can make a combo weapon, or, you know, maybe it's for certain events. I don't know. Personally, as cool as the combo weapons are, I think they should put them in the Dead Rising remake. I mean, it'd be interesting and different, but I don't know. I feel like it would mess with the regular weapons, because why would you use a guitar or a baseball bat when you can just take the bat with nails? Combo weapons are cool. They were cool in 2, but I would say don't have them in the Dead Rising remake. Realistically, they probably would be in there, though, if I had to guess. But just my opinion on that, because, yeah. They could flesh the story out. You know, they could do more with the characters. They could do more with the setting. They could give more screen time to Ed. They could give more screen time with Carlito, Brad, Jesse, Otis. Some other stuff I'd love to see. All the calls you get from Otis. All the dialogue you have with survivors that's not cutscenes. Remember how you had to read all that? If they voice work for all that, that's one of the things I'd be excited for in a Dead Rising remake. Could you imagine getting a call from Otis and you can hear what he's saying? You talk to a survivor, they actually have a voice. That would be so cool. That's something I'd love to see. Voice work for all the dialogue. In terms of the Otis thing, I mean, I could deal, like in the original, you know, I'm so good at it, right? The Otis thing, I'm sure what they would probably do with the Dead Rising remake, what they would probably do is they'd probably just do what Off the Record did, where you have a Bluetooth and you can just you can fight things while Otis calls you. I mean, I could deal with Otis in the original because I always answer his calls. I know it annoyed some people, but I don't know. I love the original. It's one of the hardest games ever. So I think with the Otis stuff, they'll probably just Bluetooth it, which I don't have a huge issue with. I'd rather them do that than make the survivor AI smarter and make it too easy to rescue him if I had to choose. But in terms of the Otis stuff, they will probably Bluetooth it, which I don't have an issue with, you know. So yeah, they could flesh out the characters. Psychopaths get more screen time. I heard in the original the cult was supposed to have a bigger role and they were supposed to be a part of the story, so they could do more of that. Like I said, you could have more screen time for all the characters. Brad, Jesse, Frank, Carlito, Isabella, Brock, Dr. Barnaby, Carlito, Otis. He could actually have voice lines. You know, a lot of these characters, as well as the psychopaths, as well as the survivors, they could just flesh everybody out, give more to them. I would also like to see more survivor side missions. Like, what I mean is, you know how you took a survivor back and, hey, you know, for example, Paul, psychopath turned survivor, he gives you Molotovs for bringing him back. I would love to see more. I'd like to see more of those in Dead Rising remake. Like, I'm trying to think of what they could do off the top of my head. Like, maybe what they could do is like I'm trying to think of a fucking example. I don't know. I can't think of one, but they could do more of those, you know, flesh the game out. I'd also like a better ending, because the original Dead Rising 1 ending, it's kind of like, you know, spoiler alert for those that haven't played or beaten it, you beat Brock and Frank just screams the top of the tank and that's it. You don't get to see them right out of the mall. So for a Dead Rising remake, they could fix that, where you get a more satisfying ending, where you get to see Frank and Isabella leave the mall, go through the town, deal with National Guard. What happens after that? You know, there's a lot there they could do. So they could do more. We could see Willamette Town, have that be explorable. There's some things I personally wouldn't want added that I know a lot of new games have. I wouldn't want sprinting. I know that's controversial, but I would not want sprinting in a Dead Rising remake. Because do you know how easy Dead Rising 1 would be if you could just fucking run everywhere? So, I don't know. They probably would add that, but I don't know. I wouldn't want sprinting in a Dead Rising 1 remake where Frank could just run like an Olympic athlete. I wouldn't want that. I didn't like it in 3, I didn't like it in 4. Like, the running, I don't know. I don't know. I wouldn't want sprinting because it would just make the game easy, you know. So get rid of the sprinting, or not get rid of the sprinting, but don't add it in the remake. Just keep. You know, you get faster as you level up. That works just fine. What's some other stuff they could do with it? You know, be faithful. You know, if you remake Dead Rising 1, Capcom, you know, be faithful. Be faithful to the story. Be faithful to the, you know, lore of the game. Don't cut content. Please don't cut content. I know every Resident Evil remake, they pretty much have cut content, but please don't cut any content for Dead Rising Remake, because that would just suck. You know, because there's no reason for it. You know, there's no reason to cut content. But yeah, Dead Rising 1 Remake would be interesting, you know. I don't know, like it's a 50-50 thing, right? Because, you know, when you take on a project that's beloved and you remake it, it's risky, you know, because if it's a disappointment or if it's really bad, then you got a problem on your hands. But it could also end up being good, so it's kind of like a 50-50 thing. But I would like to see it. And honestly, I think that's the best bet for Dead Rising, in my opinion, at least. You want to see Dead Rising come back? You want to see a return? My opinion, start from the beginning. Remake 1 and go from there. I think rebooting it would be way more risky, and I think making a new one, I mean, they could make a Dead Rising 5, but you got the shitty aftertaste of 3 and 4. They made Isabella a villain in 3. I would rather them just go back to the beginning and like reboot and remake the series, I think. You know, like remake it but reboot it at the same time, where they start over, you know? And maybe they could add more stuff with Santa Cabeza. Maybe they could even have a Santa Cabeza campaign where you get to see how that shit happened. You know, more screen time with Brock. So that's my choice. The next video game I want to see Capcom remake is Dead Rising 1. I love Dead Rising 1. It's a great game. And it would be so cool to see Capcom do a modern take on Dead Rising 1, to see what they would do with it. You know, what characters would be fleshed out, how would it look, how would it play, you know, can we explore Willamette Town this time, the story could be extended, we could see what happens with Frank and Isabella after the mall, more screen time with Brock, more done with all the characters. Maybe they could add, you know, new weapons, new areas, they could add cutscenes, they could add a lot of cutscenes for psychopaths. I got a few ideas, like, you know how David says Steven attacked me? You could have a small cutscene where Steven attacks David. You can have another cutscene where Steven kidnaps Isabella. That would give Steven more development, because Kent was a great character. Or like Cliff, you know, you could see like maybe a brief cutscene where where, you know, he talks about his daughter being killed by zombies. And you could have some kind of cutscene like that. And maybe, you know, like with Joe, for example, like maybe before Above the Law, maybe here and there you go through the mall and Otis is calling you like, you know, some of the women I called you about, Frank, they're missing. I don't know who's taking them, you know, and maybe you could have little sprinklings here and there of, you know, what's going on, like, you know, the women that got captured by Joe, and then it turns to Above the Law. You can do stuff like that. The convicts, I'd love to see them do more with the convicts. I think the convicts need a lot more done with them. How in the remake, I don't know if they'd make it to where you kill them and they're just dead, because I know in the original they just keep coming back no matter how many times you kill them. I think they should just keep it the same in terms of they should just have them keep coming back. The reason I like that is because, you know, if you kill the convicts and they never came back, Leisure Park, you know, going out there wouldn't be as challenging, and you can never get their vehicle, and their vehicle has the best durability in the game. But I'd like to see them do more with the convicts, like maybe have a cutscene where they're breaking out of prison and they kill some military people and they steal a fucking vehicle and they can go to the mall, you know. Like, it would just be so interesting in general. You know, I'd be very curious on a remake of Dead Rising 1, a modern take. What would they do with the characters? You know, how would it look? How would it play? You know, they could do more with characters. They could do more psychopaths. There's just a lot of potential there, you know. And I think remaking Dead Rising 1 is the best way to revive Dead Rising. As long as it's a faithful remake, of course. Keep the timer. You make it challenging like the original. You know, all that shit. But if they're gonna, you know, if they were to remake Dead Rising 1 and try to, you know, make it a lot different where there's no timer and, you know, it's just about killing zombies, then we wouldn't want that. I wouldn't want that. So, and then plus, you know, the future would be even better, right? Because if, let's say they remade Dead Rising 1, it did really well, it was faithful, they could remake 2. And I would, you know, I do like Dead Rising 1, but I would actually be more excited about a Dead Rising 2 remake than a Dead Rising 1 remake. Because the thing about Dead Rising 2, I like the game, but it's not as good as the first one. They could fix that with a remake. So if they remade Dead Rising 1 and it did well and it was faithful, they could go right to 2, remake Dead Rising 2 next. Actually put Sandbox in it. Maybe combine it with Off the Record. Fuck it. Put Case West and Case Zero in there and remake that too. And with a Dead Rising 2 remake, there's so much potential, because if they remade Dead Rising 2, if they want to use this engine, they could use the MT Framework engine like they originally were supposed to. They could go with the Twins' original design, because the Twins' original design for Dead Rising 2 looked way better than the final version, in my opinion. I loved how Dead Rising 2 looked in the MT Framework engine. You could see that in a Dead Rising 2 remake. They could make the game better. The survivor AI is, you know, it's harder to rescue them. They could flesh out some of the characters like Rebecca, so you actually care when she dies. They could do more with Sullivan. Maybe he could come on some missions with you like Brad, and maybe it makes his betrayal even more shocking. You're like, you son of a bitch. Do more with TK. I love me some TK, great villain. Dead Rising 2 remake would be interesting too. There's a lot of ideas they had for that game. Like, because the thing about Dead Rising 2, it's a good game, but the original ideas they had in the MT Framework engine, it looked better than what we eventually got. So if they remade 1, that would be really cool, don't get me wrong, but I would love to see them remake 2 next, and, you know, go more in the direction of what they were going to do. Have KG more involved, have the DR1 team involved, because they weren't with the original 2. Then they could go from there. They could remake Dead Rising 3, make it actually a good game and actually a Dead Rising game. Then they could remake 4, make it a good game, make it an actual good Dead Rising game, and then they could just, after they do that, then they could make part 5 and Dead Rising will be back and better than ever. They could tweak some stuff, change some things, you know, not make Isabella a villain. We can forget that DR4 Frank ever existed. So I think that's pretty much it. So yeah, in my opinion, I think the next video game that Capcom should remake, my choice, obviously it's in the thumbnail, but my choice, Dead Rising 1. It's a classic, it's a great game, it's one of my favorite video games of all time, I absolutely love it, and, you know, playing and seeing the Resident Evil remakes and reimagining, seeing Dead Space get a remake, you know, they revisited Final Fantasy VII and remade that. I want to see that for Dead Rising 1, man. It'd be so cool to see a modern take on Dead Rising 1 with these new graphics, new technology, and new everything, just to see what they would do with it, you know. I'd be so curious about it. I mean, you know, I'd be 50-50 with it, you know, because I'm not an idiot. I know things can be disappointing, you know, I'm not stupid. I know modern gaming, I have a lot of problems with it, but I would genuinely be curious on a Dead Rising remake. And, you know, I forgot to say this in the Dead Rising 5 video, but one more thing I'll say to close this off is, I know Dead Rising's never been a hugely popular, a big series. I mean, it has fans, right? But it's not like Call of Duty or Resident Evil status in terms of fame. But here's some ideas they could do with a Dead Rising remake to try to make... I mean, if they remade Dead Rising 1, maybe the series would already become more popular, because maybe new people would get into Dead Rising. Maybe they couldn't get into the original, so they'd be able to get into the remake. But you know, they could have big YouTubers play the Dead Rising remake. I think what they could do is maybe team up with some popular musicians. That's another thing I forgot to talk about. If you remake Dead Rising 1, let us have the original soundtrack, or at least have some kind of music, because I love the music. I love the boss battle themes. Keep those in there. Do new ones, or have the original soundtrack, something like that. But they could team up with musicians. Like, they could, like, I know this is random, but it would make the game popular. Team up with Eminem. Have Eminem do an exclusive song for Dead Rising 1 remake, or have Marilyn Manson compose an exclusive, like, team up with a musician, because Dead Rising 1 had a lot of music in it, underground artists, and it was cool. But I think that's maybe one of the ways they can make it more popular and get people to play it. Like, team up with a popular musician, a Marilyn Manson or an Eminem or a Rob Zombie, or somebody that would like fit Dead Rising's music and like really make it popular, you know, something like that. That's all I got to say in this video. Yeah, I would love to see a Dead Rising 1 remake. I'm currently playing through Dead Rising 1 again for the 1,000,000th time, because it's such a good game. And, you know, I want to see Dead Rising come back, and I hope it does one day. And if they ever decide to revisit Dead Rising, please do this approach. Remake the first one. I would love to see it. It would be very interesting. As long as it's faithful, as long as they do it justice, as long as they have the right people involved, and they do a lot more with it, and they do a lot of the things I wish listed, or they do things that I can't think of, and it turns out great, then that'll be good, because then Dead Rising will be back to basics. It'll be back and better than ever. Then they can remake 2, 3, and 4, and a lot of potential. I mean, at the end of the day, anything's possible, right? So we'll see if they do it or not. You know, I know they're hyper-focused on Resident Evil, but honestly, I think Capcom should give Resident Evil a break and focus on their other series. I know a lot of people want, like, a Dino Crisis remake. Some people want Onimusha remake. They got a lot of series they could remake, but my choice, Dead Rising 1. Love to see it. I'd absolutely love to see it. It'd be interesting. I just want it to be faithful. I want it to be challenging. I want it to be, you know, faithful to the original, while improving some things, adding some things. I don't want it to be so new and reimagined to where it's like a shitty version of the original and it's dumbed down and casually made and easy. I don't want that. I want a faithful, passionate remake. And if they could do it right, I'm all for it. I'm just kind of skeptical and scared at the same time, because this is modern gaming we're talking about. You know, there's a chance that it could get, there's a chance if they remade Dead Rising 1, it could be a complete train wreck. But I don't know. I'm leaning towards more, I feel like they would do it justice, at least. Because, you know, look at Dead Rising 3, look at Dead Rising 4, look at the reception, look at Dead Rising itself. They